I want to talk today about procedural fluency and how, with the Common Core math standards, you're supposed to not only have focus and coherence, but rigor. So, focus on the key skills for your particular grade level. With coherence within your grade level, but also vertical coherence and understanding your piece and that particular strand of skills that the student is learning. And then have the appropriate rigor. There are certain elements of every grade level that we're supposed to get students to procedural skill and fluency. To me, fluency is one of the hardest things to work on because to become fluent in any particular area of math, any particular skill, you have to have practiced it so much that you just immediately become automatic. It's really an automaticity. Oh, I know what to do now. Like on solving equations. In 7th grade, they should become fluent in solving two-step equations. So when they see an equation like this, oh, I add 12, divide by 5. I subtract 26, divide by -4. They know the two steps and they just get started because they have that fluency and that repeated exposure. This year in particular, I'm finding it really difficult for my students to find fluency in two-step equations. And we've talked about conceptual understanding, which is another element of rigor in the Common Core standards. And we've really conceptually dug down and understood this. We've built them out of algebra tiles. We've looked at this from so many different perspectives for conceptual understanding. But fluency has been really difficult. They're not fluent. They sort of sit here and ponder what to do. So I love to use quiz trade cards for fluency. So that's what I want to talk about today. Is just how do we get students to practice enough to become fluent in the skills that we need them to become fluent in for our particular grade level and the focus of our grade level. So I made these quiz trade cards, and here's where I get the student buy-in. So you have these cards. This is the front. They're all just a basic, two-step equation. For my particular group, they need them to have the same structure, and they need to have integers for coefficients. That's just where this group is in the moment, and because they really struggle mathematically. So on the back, you have the answer to what you're looking for from the front of the card. What I want them to know to become, fluent in solving these equations is, what do you do first? What do you do next? What do you do first? What do you do next? And so the buy-in is, I'm not actually asking them to solve. I'm asking them, what would you do to solve? So they walk around with these cards and they show somebody in the room this equation. And the student has to say, first you would add 12 and then divide by 5. I don't have them carry around a calculator. They don't do it. See, that's the buy-in. They don't have to repeatedly solve these, but they have to know what they would do for that procedural fluency. And on the back of the card, the student who's carrying it has the answers. Add 12, divide by +5. So they quiz, and then the other person changes because they have a card, and they quiz. So each student takes a quiz because each student has their own card, and they tell them based on the front what you would do in order to procedurally solve the equation. And the student who's carrying the card has no threat, there's no worry, they've got the answers on the back. So you do a quiz, and then you trade cards, and you go find somebody new. So I've been using this as my bell work to open class, and we have used these for probably 4 or 5 days now in a row, and they love it. They love this. They get up, they get to move around. This particular group of kids is just really kind of kinesthetic. They need to get up and move. They're fidgety, they tap. So the movement of the classroom has been really good for them. They buy in, and they'll do 5 or 6, 7 different people because there's no threat. They don't have to solve it. They don't have to sit there, write it out on paper. All they have to do is speak, and they have the answers right on the back. So this has done wonders for our procedural skill and fluency. So I am going to use more quiz trade cards in the future for very particular skills that I need them to become fluent with after all of our conceptual understanding. Another way that I've developed fluency, and I will use it again this year with functions, is I have, okay, this is the worst looking function machine, I realize. I've had this forever. I made this function machine years ago, and of course it looks like a Pepsi machine. And when we need to evaluate function rules in Algebra 1 or in 8th grade, I have trouble with some of them buying into, just substitution and evaluate. Substitute and evaluate. And that top card is... Oh, you can't see the edge. The variable's off the side. This is a very poor picture, I realize. They just didn't want to evaluate. They didn't want to do the practice because it's a worksheet. So for that procedural skill and fluency for Algebra 1, I made this function machine. And I put people in it. So they're in partnerships. And 2 people actually go in the machine. And I cut the slit in the bottom just the size of a dry erase board, because I have those dry erase boards in my classroom. And I have the input where you put money just the size of an index card. So out in the classroom, every student pair has an index card. And they put a number, an input number. And we keep track of these on the dry erase board at the front of the room. I write down what is the domain, and we keep track of them. And as students come up and put domain values into the machine, we're very careful to sort them in order from least to greatest on the board. And then I keep a list of the range or the outputs on the board from least to greatest. And so one student group goes in. All the other student groups are sitting out here with dry erase boards. And so a different student group goes up and they show everybody the card they're about to put into the machine. And so everybody out in the audience sees the number, maybe it's 2 or 8, that's going into the machine. Well, inside of here, I've copied all of these function rules onto a sheet of paper. And the students who are in the machine get to decide which rule they are going to put that input into. So which domain they're going to use, or which function rule they're going to use with that domain value. And they work out the math. And they have their calculators, and they show me, and I check it, and then they put the answer or the range out the bottom. So I show everybody the output. Well, I have buzzers. I used to have students run up to the front of the room, and one time I think 2 people tackled the machine. They were so into it, and I thought that might not be safe. But I have buzzers now, and the student group out in the audience who buzzes in first with the correct answer to which function rule, D, F, G, H, J, K, which rule was used in the machine to generate the output, whoever can correctly identify that first wins a point. I usually have a cup on everybody's desk, and I put something in it like a marble or a penny, and they get a point for knowing which rule was used before anybody else. And the people who are in the machine, they earn a point for correctly evaluating their output without me having to correct their math. So it's a game, and the winning team gets a prize. But what always happens is they figure out a system. When they see the number that's going in, maybe it's 2, then all my teams out here, in order to prepare, start inserting and putting in 2 as their input for each of these function rules. So basically they're evaluating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different function rules every single turn. So by the end of class, they will probably have practiced evaluating function rules 30 times. But they don't see it as practice to develop that fluency for evaluating function rules. They see it as a game. And you sort of trick them into developing fluency with this particular skill. So developing fluency after conceptual understanding, to me, is sometimes a struggle because it is practice. But how do you make practice interesting? Well, so far this has worked really well for me, and I'm really enjoying these quiz trade cards. And the students really like getting up, milling around. That my groups tend to be fairly kinesthetic. They need movement, and I really like these 2. So you can have this idea if it works for you and you need a way to develop fluency with function rules. Quiz trade cards are in my Teachers Pay Teachers, and I'm sure other teachers have it in their Teacher Pay Teachers if you don't want to make your own as well.